All right, hello everyone. Welcome. A few folks are probably going to still be trickling in because it's like 6, which is like the most awkward time. I totally understand. My name is Vincent Bertuccio. I am the organizing director for the Islip Town Democrats. I'm a little bit all over the place because I'm currently in North Carolina, Charlotte, for the U.S. Climate Action Network's annual meeting. Also helping facilitating today is going to be Garrett, who is our, he's our Viking general soldier for the Islip Dems and
Deputy chair.
deputy chair. And of course, Brian's going to help us a little bit too. Both going to be turning in. Welcome, welcome. So hello, thank you so much for coming, Jumaane.
Thanks so much for having me. Sorry, I'm running behind myself, and I'm trying to set up as I'm in travel. So I apologize, but I can keep going. I'm trying to get some light here, but we can keep going if you can see me.
Awesome. All right. So basically, the format that we're going to go with today is like we're going to ask two committee questions, which are just like introduce yourself, and then like how would you distinguish yourself from like the sort of pseudo incumbents, Hochul and Delgado, and like what how are you different on policy? How do you think you'd run the state differently? And then we're going to move into taking questions from the crowd. If you have a question, you can DM it to me directly, or you can put it in the chat, or you can DM me and say, I want to ask the question, and I'll actually turn the mic over to you. We're going until about like 6:35. So we're going to try to keep everything fairly tight to get as many questions as possible from folks. Amazing. So with that, you're welcome to introduce yourself. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you and the leadership for inviting me and that I can make it. As you mentioned, my name is Jumaane Williams. I happen to be the public advocate of the city of New York. It's the second highest ranking and one of 3 citywide elected officials. I am a first generation American. I am a public school baby, educated in New York public schools from preschool to masters. I am a community organizer by training. It was long before Barack Obama, so no one had any idea what that was. And my mother asked me to please get a real job. I could tell her that it actually was a real job. I made it to the public school system, as I mentioned, with Tourette syndrome, ADHD. And then I decided to run for office against an incumbent council member in New York City, Brooklyn. It wouldn't be the last time I was called crazy for even trying to do so, but I did. With 6 folks in the race, I was told I wouldn't have a shot. And the stars lined up. I won, and I've been trying to cause as much trouble as I can since that time. When I got elected, I was told I had to choose between being an activist and being an elected official. And I said, I don't. I think the best elected officials are activists. So I sought out to show that you can have an impact on the people's lives in government without doing the status quo kind of politics that happen that are more about incumbency protection and friends of incumbency protection than helping the people. And so what I'm thinking I'm most proud of is when I left the council, I was listed as the most productive council member. And as public advocate, just in 3 short years, we've passed more bills than all the public advocates combined. It was really important for me to show that you can move government and not play the game that people play. When I ran for lieutenant governor in 2018, again, I was told how crazy I was for trying to run against an incumbent with no money and no institutional support. We ran and we got 47% of the vote. We shocked everyone. And we got more votes than any non-white candidate ever in a statewide primary. We actually got the 3rd most of anyone. Unfortunately, the first 2 were the people I ran against, but we were able to take that energy when the public advocacy position raised up and to run there. I'm running because I keep hearing our leaders say we have to return to normal. And I keep saying, no, we don't, because normal, I don't think worked for most folks in Central Islip. I don't think it worked for most folks in New York in general. And so when I want to normalize people's lives, I don't want to go back to where we were because that's how we got there. And if we had dealt with the issues of public safety, housing, the economy, the pillars of our campaign, mental health, and food insecurity, all the things that people have got worse during the pandemic, we wouldn't have been hit as hard as we could. And then in memory of the 70,000 people we've lost, we shouldn't go back there. And so I'm asking folks to just join me in as we try to show New York what is possible, not just where we are. And our campaign is really about the working, middle, and struggling class New Yorkers who haven't seen the benefit of the status quo politics of Albany. And I'll end it there. I'm elected so I could talk for a very long time if you just let me keep going.
Thank you. So the one like committee question we've been asking everybody is, how would you distinguish yourself from like the incumbents, and how would you
Nigga,
run the state
nigga,
differently? What would be your distinguishing factors there?
nigga. Well, there's two things. One, I'm more proud of how I lost the lieutenant governor's race than I would have been if I won it the way that the current governor did, running with someone everyone knew was going to be harmful for the state. Second, I didn't get elected to get reelected or go to higher office. I'd love to do both of those things with your support, just to be clear. But I got elected to do the work of the people, and I'm hoping that's what gets me elected. And so, if Kathy Hochul who got elected for a first term, I think probably the next day will be just trying to figure out how to get reelected in 4 years. If and when we get elected, my second day is try to figure out how I can shake up Albany as much as possible to do the work of the people. There is a tremendous amount of differences on how I make decisions I make, who I take money from and who I don't take money from, and the risks I'm taking, the risk I'm politically willing to take to do the right thing. One of the clearest examples is we asked for $1 billion to be put in this budget for gun violence prevention, for victim services and youth services, because we know what works to try to deal with some of the street violence that we've seen. We could not get that. The governor, however, put $1 billion in for a stadium to be built outside of Buffalo, which is actually the city that needed the help in the first place. And I think those are some distinguishing factors of how we view government and what our government should be working on and prioritizing.
All right, thank you so much. So first up, we have a question from Brian. So Brian, take the mic.
Hey, Jumaane, thank you for joining us. I've been following your career for a long time. It's been really great.
Thank you.
So I have a question about renewables. As you probably know, the state is on a pretty ambitious goal to get the state to be carbon neutral, carbon free in the next like 10 years or so. Sort of what's your plan to bring that on? And then I also work with a lot of the unions. So what's your plan to sort of bring in a just transition so we don't have, in some cases, whole towns in upstate New York who lose all their work? And, often these are good paying jobs. So can you talk a little bit about your plan on that?
Sure. I do think one of the biggest colossal failures during this session was on climate and renewable energy. We were the first campaign that actually started highlighting what was happening in Seneca Falls around proof of mining crypto. We've been clear, and this is city specific, but it affects all of us, that congestion pricing needs to start now. We've been pushing the build public renewals bill for quite some time. As a matter of fact, the public advocate, we did a press conference. I was happy to be joined by the Assembly member who sponsored that bill. We also put a report out to try to push for public power, particularly around Con Ed. The same way we have water public power, we should have Con Ed public power. And if we don't start, we won't get it done. And so we have a huge climate plan, both myself and our running mate, Anna Maria Chila, on how we can do this. But I agree with you, we have to make sure that we bring the unions along. It doesn't have to be either or. And I think the people who benefit from profiting off of fossil fuels are pushing the either or narrative. There are really a tremendous amount of jobs that go with renewable energy and with green energy. We just have to make sure that the unions have the ability to transfer the jobs they have now with those jobs as they come in. But we can't wait any longer to do these things. And lastly, the CLCPA isn't funded even close to what it needs to be funded. And the state's own agencies have been saying that. So we have to put real money behind it if we want to achieve the goal that we have, or else it's just something on paper.
Awesome. So next up, we have a question from Garrett.
Yeah, how you doing? First of all, belated Happy Father's Day from one dad to another.
Same to you. Thank you.
Thanks. So, folks out here in the suburbs, we don't have a public advocate role or something like that here, really. So I was wondering, for those of us who may be less familiar with that, how do you see how your current position kind of translates to the governor's role, and how can you kind of maybe in a short, brief kind of explain that to everybody here, and then kind of how that translates up to the governor's role, and how you think that's a strike for you?
No problem. I'm also always happy to explain to people who live in New York City who don't know what the public advocate is. Just to be clear, the public advocate is one of 3 citywide elected officials. They're the mayor, the public advocate, and the comptroller. 4 if you count the speaker of the council. The last public advocate was Tish James. The one before her was Bill de Blasio. So God forbid something happens to the mayor, the public advocate is next in line. There are 5 charter mandated powers. One is you get to introduce legislation to the council. 2 is you're an ombudsman. 3 is you're a charter cop. You're supposed to make sure that the agencies are doing their charter mandated duties. You have an appointment on committees like CCRB, Civic Committee Review Board, and COIB, which is our Conflict of Interest Board, and you have a vote on a pension. The 6th one I always call the bully pulpit. So you're citywide, you have a decent sized budget. And I think it's a collective work that I've been doing, even as kind of executive work as a public advocate, but the work as a city council trying to manage $90 billion budgets for the past decade, really trying to get the government to move on behalf of people. We have a city council of 51 people, so trying to get anything done does take the ability to negotiate with folks, including Republicans, and I've often had unanimous bills, and I've chosen really hard bills. Bills that have to do with public safety, bills that have to do, we had a racial impact study that you can no longer rezone without having a racial impact study. I've had bills that put a moratorium on property taxes collection during the pandemic. So we have a gamut of bills. I'm actually up to 70 bills. We've been a pretty prolific legislator. And we've got funding to programs that really helped reduce violence. So we helped guide the conversation that helped New York City go from where it was to 2012, when it was gun violence spiking, to 2018, 2019. We were one of the lead voices there dealing with how to balance policing and actually address gun violence well, pretty successfully. And we see some of the same things happening across the state. And one of the reasons I'm running for governor is when I travel across the state, everybody's looking for leadership in Albany, and they're not getting it. And the organizer in me understands what I could do with the tools in the governor's office. And so I can go from less advocating for the things that I'm pushing for and more of actually just doing them.
Awesome. So next up is Steven.
Oh, hello. I'm a member of NIPAN. I put that in my
NIPAN.
name, so you know you had a friend in the house today.
Thank you.
So I met you first, I think 4 years ago at Carrie Gardner's house. And I'm going to ask you the same question now that I asked you then, slightly different version. I'm a well-known advocate of the New York Health Act and Medicare for All. But what I wanted to know from you then was what you saw as the most pressing issue in New York State. At the time, you told me affordable housing. And I was surprised. That opened my eyes to problems I wasn't aware of. So I'm kind of curious now, what would be maybe the top 3 things you could see doing to help New Yorkers, and what issues most need to be addressed?
You know, I will say when I travel the state, whether it's Suffolk or Staten Island, Buffalo to Brooklyn, there's different, ecosystems of how we live and cultures that are slightly different, that they have to be honored. But the pillars of our campaign, the 3 buckets, are generally similar from the things we've been hearing. So public safety is probably the most common thing that we hear all across the state. People are concerned. They want to be safe and they want to feel safe. A very close second, oftentimes, could actually surpass it. Actually, it still is housing. People are being evicted. People are being foreclosed on. New York actually represents the highest rents in the nation right now. It used to be San Francisco, we surpassed it. We got 220,000 people facing eviction, 90,000 homeless, and that has nothing to do with the hundreds of thousands of people that have left, and the hundreds of thousands of people that are in places that are overcrowded, and tens of thousands of people who are facing foreclosure. So it's a huge problem. I think the economy, again, is probably our 3rd pillar, because people are struggling to pay for housing, to pay for food, to pay for transportation, and to pay for healthcare. It's a real issue, and it's the number one reason that we hear people are leaving. And if folks don't understand now, after this pandemic, the intersection of housing, healthcare, and public safety, I don't think folks ever will. And a big part of healthcare is our mental health and mental health services that are pretty much lacking across the state.
Awesome. Next up is Amanda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jumaane. My name is Amanda.
Hello.
I'm a community activist. And I do mutual aid in Brentwood. So my question for you is, how do you stay true to your work while coexisting and working with people who don't believe in your work?
That's a great question. I think, one, from the time I got elected, I thought to myself, I can lose my race at any time, and that's okay. I don't want to lose a race. I don't want to lose an election, but it's possible. And in order to get the things that we have to do, we have to risk losing an election. Because if everything is about making sure you get reelected, making sure your friends get reelected and get a job, then we lose. And we see that happen in this worst case as Republicans refuse to get bills passed that have to do with any common sense gun laws while people are getting mowed down. It is only because they are terrified of getting primary, well-funded primary. And unfortunately, Democrats do the same thing. It's not seen as starkly, but it does prevent a lot of things that we care about from getting done. And so I've had to commit that this is a possibility, and I've been prepared to lose every election ever since. So that is helpful. I also try to remember the seat that I'm holding is not more important than the people I'm representing. Of course, I'm not holier than thou, so I never want to say that. And this is a tough game, but I always try to make sure that I remain true to those two things as much as possible, so I can sleep at night, regardless of how this goes. And so the LG's race again was a great example of that. I was perfectly fine. I actually, to be honest, I was actually going to exit out of politics because the public advocates race wasn't a thing I was thinking about at all. It's actually the first time I've ever been drafted. Most of the time it's just me poking my nose and trying to get involved in places. But my thing is to do what you can with what you have where you are. And I try to find the best places to use the skills that I have. And I thought the LG's race was a great place to do that. And we came up short, but we stayed true to who we are. Also, I'll tell you the truth. I always remember, I don't know anyone's particular journey that got them to where they are, if they agree with me or disagree. And so I try to respect that while I'm talking to folks, what someone's journey might be like, so I can understand what their fears are, what are they concerned about, and try to use that to try to show them that most of the time what they're scared about, what their fears are not based on what it is that we're trying to do, and not, the equity and justice framework that I use is one that's helpful for everyone, and that kind of helps massage the conversation. But I generally try to respect folks' point of view, and I try to speak to people I disagree with, because I learn a lot. Lastly, I would say I try to co-govern. And so when you co-govern with people on the ground, it gives you a bit of strength, so it's not just you pushing forward.
Awesome. So I have 2 questions that were sent to be read by me, and we'll try to get through them, but I also want to respect your time. So from, let me scroll here, from William, we have, could you please talk about how you would approach issues relevant to the LGBTQ plus community, including homelessness?
Well, obviously the LGBTQ community has a specific set of issues on top of the issues that we all have. And so all of us, all New Yorkers are struggling with so many issues that I spoke about. And the LGBT community on top of that are having to deal with homophobia or transphobia. If you happen to be a Black trans woman, that's even multiplied even more. That community in particular has seen the highest rates of homelessness and unemployment, and are being killed at rates across this country with seeming impunity. So I always try to make sure I lift that up. But we have supported programs or continue to support programs that are very specific to the LGBT community in New York City, where we have runaway shelter youth beds, which is specific to teenagers in that community, and a trans unity project that we try to make sure gets funded and maintained. But we try to make sure that we don't just have diversity, but inclusion. You can always have, hey, I have a Black friend, I have a Black employee, but that doesn't do what needs to be done. So we focus on inclusion to make sure that the things that need to be taken care of. As a matter of fact, that my office focusing on Black trans women came specifically from the inclusion work that we've done and some of the big work that we continue to do. So just making sure that you have a diverse and included representative from all these communities, including the LGBT community, making sure you lift up the issues and intentionally try to focus on the barriers that are preventing that community from living the best lives that everybody wants.
Awesome. So we have one more question I'm going to get in, and we're going to let you go to let you have your time. So this is a bit of a lengthy question. It's from Chris Quinn. What programs, strategies, or ideas, if elected governor, would you pursue to help improve the distrust and general unease that exists between law enforcement who have pre-existing implicit racial biases and those in communities they serve and predominantly comprised of ethnically marginalized groups to prevent things like the school to prison pipeline of underprivileged youth, the immense disproportionate incarceration of Black and brown Americans that perpetuates the prison industrial complex, and an overall more fair criminal justice system in our state?
That is a long question, and I appreciate it. The former speaker of the council's name is Christine Quinn, but that question doesn't sound like it's Christine Quinn. It sounds like another Chris Quinn. So I'm assuming it's not the speaker. But that's an important. Hold on a second. I'm sorry. Sorry. That's that's a space that I've been working in a long time. A lot of matter of fact, people began to know some of the work that we've done, which is around the abuses of stop question at first. By the way, many people don't know that in order to do the job of an officer anywhere in this country, you have to have the ability to stop someone for reasonable suspicion that can lead to a frisk with probable cause. So we never had issues with that. What was happening though was unconstitutional. They were actually stopping people in terms of making quotas, which was the primary problem. But I always, have this conversation in a pretty balanced way because one of the biggest issues is that people equate public safety with policing, and you shouldn't do that. And police, I believe, have an important job to do, and we want to make sure that taxpayers can have their tax money work for them. And if they call law enforcement, they can get that support with transparency and accountability. But too often what we're doing is we're asking police to do the job of all other agencies that are not properly funded and community groups that need funding as well. And so it's really having a conversation about what public safety is and what's policing role in that. And we missed a great opportunity to have that conversation a few years ago during the George Floyd protest, because everybody focused on defund, which was just a waste of an opportunity. Now I tell folks, as much as I was associated with that, you won't find a video of me saying defund the police. You can try, because I just thought it wasn't the best phrasing at the time. But what I told leaders was that our job is not to tell people in the street who are in pain and trauma how to express that pain and trauma. Our job is to take it and turn it into workable solutions and policy. But people spend so much time on this word, and it's a problem I have with the party that I belong to when they're terrible in talking about public safety. Democrats are, period. And so when they can't talk about it, they go to Republican talking points. And Republicans are better at their own talking points. And I actually think their solutions are worse. And had we had a conversation about what public safety is, what is a community when a community feels safe and we deem it safe, what does it look like? What are the resources that it has? That conversation, I think, would have went well. But again, people are so focused on getting reelected, focused on this and that we couldn't have that conversation. Former Governor Cuomo almost got this right, almost. He said he's going to withhold municipal funds from cities and municipalities until they give him a policing plan. We said, please don't ask for a policing plan, ask for a public safety plan. Within that, you'll have a transparent, accountable policing system, but all the other things will be there. We just couldn't get it because people didn't have the courage or the ability to have this conversation. I think we've been having this conversation very well for a number of years. Even most people that think they disagree with me, when I can get them in a room and have a conversation, we walk away agreeing with 95% of what I said. Also, what's problematic is very often this question is asked in debates of 60-second sound bites. You cannot have a conversation on public safety in 60 seconds. And that causes a lot of problems as people try to truncate things. So it either sounds like you are not doing enough, or you're going to do something that's very harmful to communities. And so it just takes some ability to walk people through things. And I'm hoping, and what's troubling me about this election, it seems like we're doing it again, is we very often as a Democratic Party, we give people a thing to vote against. Vote against this person because they're gonna be bad, instead of giving them a vision to vote for. And I think we have the courage to give a vision to vote for. People will respond to that. We just have to have the courage and ability to go forward and do it.
Thank you so much. I wish we could take more questions, and we definitely want to respect your time. Thank you so much for coming. Taking
Thank
off
you.
my formal ITDC hat for a brief second, you definitely have my support, and I encourage others to vote for you as well. Putting it back on, thank you so much for your time. We're happy to have all the candidates. You got a lot of hype in the chat from that answer from everybody.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much. You have a really appreciate you coming by.
Peace and blessings to you, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great one. Thank you.